I don't know if you guys have heard this lecture from somebody else, but if you're using Photoshop or anything and you don't calibrate your monitor, you may as well just go home and bash your head on the wall, because you're chasing your tail if you don't have a calibrated monitor. And monitor calibration is cheap. You can buy the little Huey whatever for $89, I think. And even good monitor calibration's under $200. And you can also buy one device and share it with 4 friends, because you don't have to do it every day. And once you have the device, you can move it from computer to computer. The one I use is an I1. It's literally the letter I and a 1 by Greytag Macbeth. And I think the device was $200. And the software is essentially free. And I have 5 or 6 people who come and borrow mine, take it home, balance their monitor, bring it back. They just use the software. And yes?
Does that work on all type of monitors, or are we dealing with the difference between Mac and PC?
They have software for each. It'll work on a laptop. Most of them will work on a laptop, a flat panel, a CRT, Mac, PC, doesn't matter. And it's the device is what you essentially pay for. And then the software to make it run gets loaded on your computer. You plug in the device, you balance your monitor, then you don't need the device anymore.
Right.
So you can share it with a friend. So if you guys, I mean, literally, if there's a lot of you who don't have monitor calibration, maybe get together, spend $150 for an I1 and rotate it from house to house, right, and balance your monitors once a month. I do mine every 2 weeks, and it's enough that when I rebalance it, I never, the change is so subtle I don't see it. I'm sure that if you're not somebody who does this every day, you could do it once a month and maybe less often than that, and be fine. But in my experience, the least amount of effort towards monitor calibration with a calibration device is better than the best you can do using little gamma tricks where you adjust this till the little apple goes away on Macs, or there's one for Windows that's the same way. Which picture looks more like this? That'll never work. The devices do a great job, and they're relatively cheap, and so that's something you guys should look into. Because if you get the device right, then you can send your printout, and if you send it to somebody who's color balanced, it'll come back looking not exactly, but more or less like it looked on your monitor. And if you've ever had that experience where you send something out, you get it back, and it doesn't quite look right, it's not their fault. It's probably yours. So seriously consider that. Remember, I said this earlier, a screen is not a canvas. And things will have more depth and more luminance and more everything on the screen than they do once they're flat. And I know that Photoshop has its little proofing algorithm that there's a thing where you can soft proof it, and you click proof, and it'll theoretically imitate paper. It's not the same. It's still being done with backlight. So that you have to understand, if it's the first time you've ever made a print, don't plan on getting it right the first time till you get that sense of what is going to work. And I'm going to highly recommend that whatever you're going to do to print your picture, that you do it with some cheap ones first. Do a couple of 4x6s and get them back and look at it and say, that's not what I intended. Till you get something in the neighborhood of what you like, because that way you're spending 25 cents and not $25 to get a print made.
Is there a kind of paper you recommend for the print?
I'm going to recommend for exhibit, especially in the space you have up there, there's 2 questions. The question is just glossy or E. And glossy is great because it's crisp and clear, but in that space up there, I think glossy is going to be a disaster. Because there's lots of surfaces, and there's lots of pictures, and there's lots of light, and I think you're going to pick up every reflection in the world. So glossy paper will give you a little better color saturation, and it will give you a little more snap, but the E-surface papers now are so much better.
What kind of paper do you
E-surface is it's E is the standard matte. If you're asking brand, that I can actually tell you, hands down, find somebody who prints on the Fuji Crystal Archive paper. It's a great paper.
Say that again.
Fuji Crystal Archive.
Paper?
paper. It's not some rare, expensive commodity. If you go to Shutterfly, your pictures come back on Fuji Crystal Archive. It's a commonly used paper, but it's worth asking, what do you print your pictures on? And so, one of the things, if you're real, I'll make a recommendation for you. If you're really not so sure about your monitor calibration, your ability to do all of that, and you go to somewhere like Color Inc., which is a pro lab in Grand Rapids, and they'll ship stuff up here. If your order is $15 or more, they ship it free. They charge you $2 for an 8x10 if it's color, if you know it's right. They charge you $3.50 if you want them to balance it. And if you're not sure, that's a pretty good $1.50. So if you're new to this and you're just not feeling comfortable, do something like that. Go to a real pro lab like Color Inc. I really like them. The fact that they're in Grand Rapids makes it, feel a little better, but I deal with them online and they ship stuff to me, so they could be in Kentucky, it doesn't matter. The prices are reasonable, they're good people, so if you don't have a lab you like, it's just colorinc.com. And I think you have to get an account, but you don't have to be a professional photographer or anything like that to set up an account.
Did you say $2 for an 8x10?
I think it's, my point is just, it's a little more to have them color balance.
So tell them color balance.
Well, no, they have their standard pricing and their custom color or something.
Okay.
And the two price lists are, it's not like it's 60% or 600 times more. It's a couple bucks more. It's worth it. It's really worth it. If you haven't been told this, I already told you, when you have a print, actually if you're going to take my advice and print some 4x6s, which is not a bad way to go, take a handful of those guys and take them up to this gallery space. Come during the day and take a look. Say, how do they look in this light? And when you get your final print, before you mat it or anything, run it up here. Because don't be cheap. If you got to spend another $6 for another print, or another $12 for another print, it's nothing. It's worth it. It's really worth it to get it right. And you'll be much prouder of the result when you have a sense of, okay, I know what's wrong with this print. The colors are too flat, or it's not contrasty enough, or whatever. And that's going to really help you. And if you're not sure what to do, you're not in competition. I know it's a competition, but it's not really a competition. Ask your fellow club members. This print doesn't look right to me. What should I have done to it? Or what should I do to it to make it look better? I really recommend that. Get second opinions. Don't be a man by himself out there when you're looking at prints. Okay, last thing, presentation. You get to pick how you want to present your photo. That's your choice. But I will tell you my bias. My bias, especially in a show like this, is that you have a generous mat around your photograph. Because there's going to be lots of visual distraction, and you're going to, the purpose of the mat is not to bring out the blue in somebody's eyes. It's to isolate the picture from the rest of the background. And in a gallery space like this, with a lot of other things, you want your mat to be neutral white. Absolutely. You don't want a tan mat. You don't want to, maybe if you're going for something wacky, you want to go with a black mat, that's okay. But you never, when you pick your mat, and this is really important, you never want to have the white point of the mat board itself be brighter or whiter than the white point of your paper that you're using. That's a big mistake I see people make. They grab a super bright white mat because it looks nice and clean, and then their photograph in it doesn't have a super bright white. And all of a sudden the whites in their photograph look muddy.
So the mat should be less white. Or, I mean,
in the neighborhood would be the best.
The brighter white should be in the photo.
Not necessarily. They can be equal.
Oh, okay.
Equal is okay, just not less. The photo can't be less.
Okay, so
can't have, like if your photo base, if you're printing your paper, and it's perfectly legitimate. I've seen some absolutely beautiful photographs made on Somerset velvet in an inkjet printer. The Somerset Velvet is like a slightly textured paper. It's beautiful, and I'm sure there'll be somebody who enters in the fine art category, in the manipulated, where they do something and they print it on a velvet. It can make a gorgeous photograph, but it's about the color of his shirt. Yeah, it's maybe a little whiter than that, but not much. And you stick that in a bright white mat, and it looks terrible.
Yeah.
It sort of ruins the organic feel of the whole thing. So make sure your matte paper, if you've never done this, I don't know how many of you have ever done this, go to somewhere where they do mats and say, well, I need a white mat, and if the person's in a mood for a laugh, they'll like hand you 25 things that are like a subtle gradation of the same color white. So that, I mean, there's white and there's white. So it's not like it's without choice, but that's one of the criteria, is what's the paper base that you're working on. And if you are printing your own on an inkjet, which is, again, tricky business, and if you want to do it, that's cool if you know how to do it. Cut off a scrap of that white paper and take it and find a mat board that looks just like it. That way you can know that you have some harmony between the two. That's what you're looking for. Your mat is part of your presentation. Remember that. I'm going to do everything I can to give respect to the photograph specifically, but I'm only human, and I'm going to see what's around it. Another thing that I find, and this is not so much, because I will look past it if you have a really ugly frame on your picture, but in my advice, you should use you don't want a mat that's this wide, because it's distracting. And you don't want a mat that's this thin, or a frame, I mean, that's this thin. You want a frame that's maybe an inch to get the photograph off the surface it's hanging on, so a little bit of a thick depth of frame is a good thing, but a big fat edge is not. You want a thinnish, maybe no more than a ½ inch thick frame, and black, or some kind of natural wood, but not red and not blue. I don't even like metal frames. And the reason I don't like, when I say metal, I mean silver or gold. And the reason I don't recommend silver or gold is for the same reason I don't recommend a whiter matte than your photograph. Because then you have something shiny and metallic that takes away from you want the shiny metallic thing, or the shiny attention-getting thing, to be the photograph.
That's right.
You want the matte and the frame to fall away. They disappear. It's a bad place to spend a lot of money anyways. Make sure your mat is thick enough to isolate the print, and do balance your mats so that the top and the sides, this may mean having a mat cut rather than buying one, so that the top and sides match. The bottom can be a little thick.